Hey, story lovers, for more inspiring, shocking, and emotional tales, make sure to subscribe to Dream Nest Stories.
It was a typical afternoon in the heart of New York City. The streets were bustling with life, cars honking, pedestrians rushing, and tourists snapping pictures of the towering skyscrapers. Amidst the chaos, an elderly woman, frail and visibly struggling to carry a few small bags of groceries, walked cautiously along the crowded sidewalk. Her pace was slow, her movements careful, but no one seemed to notice. Smart. Suddenly, her legs buckled. The grocery bags fell from her hands as she collapsed onto the cold pavement. People nearby froze for a moment, their expressions a mix of shock and uncertainty. Then, as if nothing had happened, most continued on their way, unwilling to get involved. A few glanced back, murmuring to one another, but no one stepped forward to help. The woman tried to lift herself up, her face contorted in pain. "Please," she whispered faintly, but her voice was drowned out by the noise of the city. She clutched her chest, her breathing labored, while her groceries spilled across the ground. Apples rolling into the street, and a loaf of bread crushed underfoot by a passerby. Across the street, sitting in a sleek black car, Barron Trump noticed the commotion. At first, he wasn't entirely sure what was happening, but his sharp eyes caught sight of the woman lying helplessly on the sidewalk. Without a second thought, he signaled his driver to pull over. "Stop the car," Barron said firmly. The driver hesitated, eyeing the crowded street. "It's too chaotic here, sir," he responded, but Barron had already opened the door. Bois! As he stepped out, the tall, poised teenager instantly drew attention. Dressed in a casual yet sharp outfit, Barron navigated the throngs of people with purpose. His expression was calm, but filled with determination. The closer he got to the woman, the more he realized how dire the situation was. Her breathing was shallow, and her trembling hands were clutching at her chest. She looked up at him weakly as he crouched beside her. "Check on her." "Ma'am, are you okay?" Barron asked gently, his voice steady but full of concern. The woman's lips quivered, but she couldn't muster a response. He quickly glanced around at the crowd, his frustration growing as he noticed that no one else was stepping in to help. "Somebody call an ambulance," Barron called out, his voice carrying over the din of the city. A young woman nearby pulled out her phone and began dialing, inspired by his urgency. Barron took off his jacket, placing it under the elderly woman's head to give her some comfort. "You're going to be all right," he assured her, though his heart raced with worry. The crowd, which had initially ignored the scene, began to gather, murmuring in hushed tones. Whispers about who Barron was and his willingness to help spread quickly, but Barron wasn't concerned with their chatter. The woman's hand weakly grasped his. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Barron gave her a small, reassuring smile. "Just hold on. Help is on the way," he said softly, keeping her focused on his calming presence. As sirens wailed in the distance, the crowd grew larger. People began pulling out their phones, recording the moment. Yet amidst all the noise and attention, Barron's focus remained solely on the woman, proving that true compassion requires neither an audience nor recognition. The sirens grew louder, signaling the arrival of emergency responders. Barron stayed by the elderly woman's side, his presence a source of calm amidst the chaos. Her frail hand still clutched his as he spoke softly, encouraging her to focus on her breathing. The paramedics quickly parked on the curb, pushing through the gathered crowd with a stretcher. A young EMT knelt beside the woman, checking her vitals. "She's dehydrated and likely suffering from exhaustion," the medic said, glancing at Barron. "You did the right thing staying with her." Barron nodded but didn't move from his spot until the medics carefully lifted the woman onto the stretcher. "Will she be all right?" he asked, his brow furrowed with concern. "She'll need medical attention and rest," the EMT replied, "but thanks to you, she's got a good chance." As the stretcher was wheeled toward the ambulance, the woman weakly turned her head to Barron. "Thank you, young man," she murmured, her voice raspy but sincere. Tears welled in her eyes, and despite her pain, she managed a faint smile. "It's the least I could do," Barron said humbly, his tone soft. The ambulance doors closed, and as it pulled away, the crowd around Barron erupted into applause. People who had once walked past without a second glance now looked at him with admiration. Yet Barron didn't bask in the attention. He instead turned to the scattered groceries still lying on the pavement. With quiet determination, he began picking up the bruised apples, the crushed bread, and a carton of spilt milk. A few onlookers stepped forward to help, moved by his example. One man brought over a new bag from a nearby store. "Here, let me help you with that," the man offered. "Thanks," Barron replied with a nod, placing the recovered items into the bag. He scanned the area for any other lost items before standing up, holding the bag tightly. Does anyone know where she lives?" Barron asked the crowd, his voice carrying authority yet remaining approachable. A middle-aged woman who had stayed near the scene stepped forward. "I've seen her before," she said. "She lives a couple of blocks down on one of those older apartment buildings. She's always carrying groceries by herself. But I didn't know she was in such bad shape." Barron nodded, processing the information. He made a mental note to follow up later. For now, he knew his role in the moment wasn't finished. Turning to the crowd, he addressed them with unexpected grace and maturity. "If you see someone struggling, don't ignore it. This city is full of people who need help. Sometimes just a kind word or a small gesture can make all the difference." His words resonated, leaving the crowd silent for a moment before murmurs of agreement rippled through. But don't. As Barron prepared to leave, a journalist who had arrived during the commotion approached him with a microphone. "Mr. Trump," she began, "your actions today have inspired so many people. What drove you to step in and help when others didn't?" Barron paused, his expression thoughtful. "It's not about who you are or where you come from," he said. "It's about recognizing the humanity in each other. If we can't do that, then what's the point of anything else?" The journalist nodded, visibly moved by his words. Cameras continued to flash as Barron walked back to his car, the bag of groceries in hand. Ultimo Beast. Though the crowd eventually dispersed, Barron's actions lingered in their minds. Many left feeling inspired to look at the world and their own actions through a kinder lens. But for Barron, this wasn't about making a statement or gaining attention. It was simply about doing what he felt was right. Barron couldn't shake the image of the elderly woman's frail body collapsing on the busy street. That night, as he sat in the quiet of his study, he opened his laptop and began researching local resources for seniors. He discovered that many older individuals in the city lived in poverty, often with limited access to health care or basic necessities. The thought troubled him deeply. He decided he couldn't just move on from what had happened. The next morning, with the grocery bag he had recovered in hand, Barron set out to find the woman's apartment. It was a modest, run-down building, its facade chipped and weathered. The stairwell smelled faintly of mildew, and the flickering lights cast shadows on the peeling walls. After a few inquiries with neighbors, Barron found her apartment on the third floor. He knocked gently, unsure of what to expect. After a moment, the door creaked open, revealing the woman leaning on a cane. She looked frailer than she had on the street, but her face lit up when she saw him. You came?" she said, her voice quivering with surprise. "Of course," Barron replied with a kind smile. "I brought your groceries back. I wasn't sure if they'd be usable, so I replaced a few things." Tears welled up in her eyes as she opened the door wider. "Come in, please," she said, motioning for him to enter. The apartment was small, sparsely furnished, but impeccably clean. A photo of a younger version of herself, smiling with a man and a little girl, sat on a dusty shelf. Barron placed the bag on her kitchen counter. "How are you feeling today?" he asked. "Better," she said. "Thanks to you, I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't stopped the help." "It was the right thing to do," he said simply. As they talked, Barron learned her name was Margaret. She had lived in the city her entire life, but after her husband passed away and her daughter moved abroad for work, she found herself alone. The rising cost of living and her limited pension left her struggling to make ends meet. Barron listened intently, his heart heavy with empathy. "No one should have to go through this," he said finally. "You've worked your whole life, raised a family, and now you're left to fend for yourself? It's not fair." Margaret shrugged, a resigned smile on her lips. "Life isn't always fair," she said. But Barron wasn't willing to accept that. "I think we can do better," he said, determination in his voice. Before leaving, he promised to check on her again soon. Margaret thanked him profusely, her gratitude evident in her tearful eyes. That evening, Barron began making calls. He reached out to local charities, community centers, and even city officials. He wanted to not only help Margaret, but also address the systemic issues that left so many like her in such dire straits. The next day, Barron returned to Margaret's apartment, this time with a few surprises. He brought fresh groceries, a new cane, and even a portable heater for her chilly apartment. But more importantly, he came with news. I've spoken to a few people, he told her. We're setting up a program to help seniors in the area. It'll provide meals, medical checkups, and community support. Margaret's eyes widened in disbelief. You're doing all this because of me. Because of you and people like you, Barron said. No one should feel forgotten. Margaret took his hand, her grip weak but full of emotion. You're a good man, Barron, she said. Your parents must be proud. Her words humbled him. As he left her apartment, Barron felt a renewed sense of purpose. The story didn't end there. Margaret's story and Barron's actions began to spread, inspiring others to step up and help their communities. His initiative quickly grew, with volunteers and donations pouring in from all over the city. As the weeks went by, Barron's initiative to help seniors gained momentum. What had started as a simple act of kindness toward Margaret turned into a full-fledged community movement. The program, named Project Warm Hearts, began providing hot meals, medical care, and companionship to hundreds of elderly individuals who had long been overlooked. Margaret became the unofficial face of the initiative, her story touching the hearts of everyone who heard it. News outlets picked up the story, framing Barron not just as a figure of privilege, but as someone using his position to create meaningful change. At a press conference, reporters asked him why he had started the project. Barron's response was simple yet profound. Margaret reminded me of something we all forget too often, that behind every face is a story. No one deserves to be ignored or forgotten. If we all take just a moment to care, we can change lives and maybe even the world. The applause was thunderous, but Barron wasn't focused on the recognition. His thoughts were with Margaret and others like her. One chilly afternoon, Barron returned to Margaret's apartment, this time with a camera crew. He wanted to film a short segment to promote Project Warm Hearts. Margaret was hesitant at first, shy about being on camera, but Barron convinced her by saying, "Your story can inspire so many people to do good. You'd be helping me spread the message." The segment was a hit, and donations to the program doubled overnight. Volunteers of all ages signed up, eager to contribute. Some offered to deliver meals, while others provided transportation for seniors to doctor's appointments. But the most touching moment came a few weeks later. Margaret's estranged daughter, Lisa, saw the video online. Moved by her mother's resilience and Barron's kindness, she reached out to reconnect. One sunny morning, Margaret opened her door to find her daughter and young granddaughter standing on her doorstep, holding flowers and smiling through tears. The reunion was emotional. Margaret hugged them tightly, her frail arms trembling with joy. "I thought I'd lost you forever," she whispered. "You didn't lose me, Mom," Lisa said, her voice choked with emotion. "I'm sorry I stayed away for so long. I'll do better. I promise." Barron, who had quietly arranged the reunion, watched from a distance, his heart full. He knew this was what the project was truly about, bringing people together and rekindling hope. In the following months, Margaret's health improved. With her daughter's support and the care provided by Project Warm Hearts, she regained her strength and began volunteering herself, helping prepare meals for other seniors. Barron continued to visit her regularly, often bringing books or flowers. He valued their conversations and the lessons he learned from her wisdom. Margaret's small apartment, once a symbol of loneliness, became a beacon of community and love. As Project Warm Hearts expanded to other cities, Barron remained humble. In interviews, he deflected praise, saying, "This isn't about me, it's about us, all of us, choosing to look out for one another. Kindness doesn't require wealth or power, it just takes a little effort." Years later, when Margaret passed away peacefully in her sleep, her funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives she had touched, directly or indirectly. Barron gave a heartfelt eulogy, sharing how one chance encounter on a busy street had changed his life forever. "She taught me that even in our darkest moments, there's light to be found," he said, his voice breaking. "We just have to be willing to look for it and to share it with others." Margaret's legacy and Barron's determination to honor it continued to inspire countless people around the world. Project Warm Hearts became a symbol of compassion, proving that one act of kindness can spark a movement. As Barron stood at Margaret's graveside, a soft breeze rustling the leaves, he felt a sense of peace. He knew she was proud, and he vowed to carry her spirit of kindness with him always. And so the story of Margaret and Barron became a timeless reminder. Even the smallest acts of humanity can create ripples that touch hearts, change lives, and leave the world a better place.